Hi, I'm Melanie Racine, a technical marketing engineer with XIO Technologies. This video presentation is to help XIO associates with an introduction to Citrix, its product lines, particularly their VDI solutions, and discuss how our ICE product lines are a great fit as a storage solution to ensure a successful implementation. We're going to go over a brief overview of my experiences working with Citrix, a review of Citrix's history and their relationship with Microsoft. We'll discuss their product lines and get into a deeper dive of their virtualization products. I'll discuss how our products can work with Citrix for the best VDI environment, and then I'll wrap up the presentation. So, a little bit about myself. I've been a server administrator going on 2 decades now. And I first started working with Citrix's product lines when I was at University of North Texas Libraries back in 1997. I've pretty much been working with Citrix products in lockstep since that time. Through the years, I've been certified in a variety of their products, going as far back as WinFrame 1.8. I was a Citrix Certified Enterprise Administrator of 1.8, a couple of different versions of Presentation Server, XenApp 6.5, and my most recent certifications are the Citrix Certified Administrator on the virtualization and the networking platforms. I'm most familiar with the products that we now call XenApp, XenDesktop, as well as their NetScaler product line, which is a hybrid switch and security device. I've worked from small environments to large environments with thousands of users, and I've also done my stint in the consulting world, traveling the world, helping customers with best practices, retrofitting problem environments, or setting up and scoping new environments. So why am I here at XIO? Well, I was brought in to provide a voice to what our customers are thinking, feeling, and what they need from us. In addition, I'm here to test our product against Citrix's common configurations and give you some technical information about how they perform. Citrix was founded by a group of ex-IBM developers. The name Citrix is a combination of Unix and Citrus, since Ed, the founder, moved the company to Southern Florida for its new headquarters. Their goal was to rewrite OS/2 and make it multi-user compatible. This product became known as WinView. To save costs, they bypassed IBM and went straight to Microsoft to get the rights for OS/2. WinView never took off, being seen by the IT community as an oddity without much applicable use due to the low number of users that could simultaneously connect to a server at once. They eventually dropped WinView and started working on WinFrame, a multi-user version of the Windows NT 3.5.1 kernel. Citrix was able to reprogram the kernel to allow multiple users to connect to a single Windows server and run their individual sessions in a separate memory space without impacting another user. This is what we typically call a multi-Win environment. It worked very well, and soon WinFrame was a very popular product for IT departments to offer remote access to applications, even over a modem. When it came time to move forward with the product based on the NT 4.0 technology, Microsoft and Citrix started to disagree on the future of the product. After a lot of back and forth, an agreement was reached. Citrix gave Microsoft the code that enabled their OS to spawn multiple Windows sessions on a server, but they would withhold many of the key bells and whistles offered by Citrix. An IT department could certainly set up a group of terminal servers, which is the name Microsoft gave to the multi-Win feature. But beyond a dozen users, the ability to manage, as well as the need for additional features, would probably send you to Citrix to buy the additional software, which was now referred to as Metaframe. Microsoft makes money on the server and the base CAL costs, but the lack of management tools and the features ensures that Citrix will get their share of the pie as well. Since then, Citrix and Microsoft have a close relationship, and they will continue to do so. So where is Citrix today? A phrase you'll often hear is any device, anytime, anywhere, because their focus is on mobile services. Their flagship products fall under the Xen title. XenApp is the product that we talked about a little bit earlier. It sits on top of Windows Terminal Services, and its roots go back to WinFrame. It allows you to launch a Windows application, and it presents that application to any device with any OS. XenDesktop, their VDI environment, uses similar core technology as XenApp. The users can connect to a remote virtual desktop, and it can be virtual, or they can actually broker a connection to an actual hardware desktop. XenServer is the hypervisor technology that Citrix has, and we'll get into that in a little bit. When you're talking to customers, they may talk about other products that Citrix have which are key to their environment. The first is Storefront. It's a web portal that brokers an incoming user and tells them what they have access to. Some users or customers may also refer to Web Interface, which is an older version of the web portal technology, but still very popular and still in use today with many users. A NetScaler is a hybrid switch that offers SSL, load balancing, and much, much more. If you're familiar with Juniper devices and F5s, it's kind of a little bit of both. If you want to encrypt your traffic, if you want to offer virtual IPs for load balancing, and if you want to do any type of client-side evaluation to determine if the client meets certain security features before you allow them in, NetScaler is definitely the best of breed. You might be familiar with Citrix's go-to lines, such as GoToMeeting and GoToMyPC. These are cloud-based applications hosted by Citrix and handled by a different sales team, so chances are we won't be interacting with their product line. Citrix also offers a cloud suite, which is geared towards enterprises looking to host cloud-based applications. In addition, in the past couple of years, they've entered into enterprise data access. If you're familiar with Chatter on Salesforce, Citrix has their own product called Podio. If you are familiar with Dropbox, they also have their own product called ShareFile, which allows you to integrate various aspects in apps and desktop, the go-to products, the cloud products, and access your files from any location. Now, as for XenApp and XenDesktop, they are going to work on any hypervisor. Chances are, if your customers are already looking at vSphere, this is typically something that was not a choice of the VDI admins, or I should say the choice was taken out of their hands. Chances are the environment or the company you're working with already has a very large vSphere environment, and because there are clusters that already exist, there's talent in terms of full-time employees that are VMware certified admins there. They're not going to want to spin off another hypervisor to host XenApp and XenDesktop. But no worries, they will integrate very well with the vSphere environment. However, there are some people who will be using XenServer, which is Citrix's hypervisor. It's probably the least used, but it speaks Citrix. The phrase I like to say is they all went to the same fraternity. They all know the same handshake. What this means is that the console integrations work very well. The plugins work very well with each other. In my opinion, it's the easiest of the three hypervisors to configure. And it can definitely be used outside of just deploying a Xen realm. The good thing is your customers, depending upon their license level, may have XenServer for free. So if cost is a factor, this is definitely one they may want to check into. The last, of course, is Hyper-V. Now, prior to 2012, the hypervisor platforms offered with Microsoft Windows were not really enterprise ready. However, the 2012 version is very much at the big boys table in terms of being able to actually handle an enterprise scale cluster. If your users are looking at going with Hyper-V, XenApp and XenDesktop definitely will work with them. Now, XenApp is definitely the longest running product that Citrix has had, and although Citrix tried to make it more of a tertiary supporting application as XenDesktop with the early releases of 7.1, they definitely found their customers still like it and still use it very much so as a platform for deploying applications. So don't be surprised if you're approached by customers whose only focus is working with XenApp. Now, if the customer is looking at XenDesktop, chances are they also need to look at XenApp as well. There could be applications that just do not fit within their desktop images. What I mean by this is there may be applications that, due to versioning or how they were written, they won't work with a Windows desktop environment and only with a Windows Server environment. There's also environments where an application's need for things like Java may conflict with the Java that's already installed in the desktop image. And XenApp allows you to isolate and deploy these without any conflict within the image and the application. Also, there may be applications that fit outside of the 80-20 rule, meaning that your images should have the applications that 80% of your users need at all times. Let's say, for instance, you've got a finance department and there are 50 people that need a application that also comes with security issues, because you don't want everybody trying to hack into your finance software. So you're not going to bake that into the general image that you're going to deploy to your entire environment. But you also don't want to make an image just for 50 users. That's a lot of overhead. So instead, give your finance users the general purpose image that everyone else gets and put their application in XenApp so they can still access it with the security parameters that you need. Also, there may be applications that you want your users to access outside of XenDesktop. For instance, I usually will put all of my consoles and administrative tools inside of XenApp. And then that way at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, when I'm sitting down with my family at the restaurant and getting ready to put in an order for dinner, and the call comes through that, I need to just reset the permissions on this account, I can go straight into my portal, launch my console, do what I need to do, and get out. And I don't have to make that extra hop of logging into XenDesktop and then logging into my application. So when you're meeting with customers, you need to take into account that Citrix admins, particularly if they are brand new to the Citrix environment, are typically a Windows admin who drew the short stick. They may be relying on research from old, dated information, particularly if they're researching XenDesktop topics, because XenDesktop 7.x, which is what has come out in the past year, is still relatively new. And there's still a lot of information out there about XenDesktop 4 and XenDesktop 5 that may not apply to XenDesktop 6. So if they have some questions or some things that aren't making sense, you might want to tell them to make sure they're getting the most up-to-date information. In addition, Citrix is a bit of a specialty. It takes some finesse and it takes some knowledge, and they may not have that knowledge or expertise. Prior to XenDesktop's release of 7.x in the last year, I'll admit their products have not quite been ready for prime time. XenDesktop 4, definitely not a good product for enterprise environments. 5.6, the controllers were much better, but the supporting software really wasn't to do it. And a lot of implementations really did fail. Why? Because up until a couple of years ago, we really had a poor understanding of the ties between storage and performance by admins. To be truthful, I've deployed virtual environments and had no idea I needed to worry about performance of the storage on the back end. I just asked the storage admins to give it to me. As I mentioned, some of the supporting tools, such as provisioning server, were very buggy and ineffective. And one of the biggest things that I think that works against a VDI deployment, ITIL has given us some really solid infrastructure in terms of siloing IT so that different groups work for each other as service providers. But what that actually does is it ends up working against the VDI admin. Why? Because the VDI admin has to go across all silos. Not only do they have to be the server administrator, but there's a lot of desktop administration that goes in there. There's a lot of storage administration that goes in there. And there's a lot of network administration that goes in there. If each of these silos has definitive lines and they're really working on a service-only operation, they actually work against each other. And the VDI admin really can't see what's going on the different layers and get the support he or she may need to successfully implement their environment. So, there's some contentious topics in the Citrix environment regarding provisioning. And this is what I call my Coke versus Pepsi argument. First off, let's do a little background here. There's 4 types of desktop connections that you can actually host inside of XenDesktop. The first one is if you actually have hardware-based PCs and you want a user to be able to connect to that machine remotely, we can do a remote brokered connection to a remote PC. Another one is what we call a persistent VM, which means we built a VM and we've assigned it to a user, and that VM is unique. The desktop is unique. It may be managed, but still it is a unique desktop. They can update it. It's theirs. Now the Coke versus Pepsi part is where we get into provisioned machines. You can provision your machines using machine creation services, what we call MCS, or you can provision your machines using a technology called provisioning services, or PVS. When you start talking to Citrix admins about MCS versus PVS, it's almost a religious argument. You could actually probably start a riot at Synergy by standing up in the middle of the floor and saying MCS is better than PVS, and then stand back and watch the mayhem ensue. So MCS is probably used the most. Why is that? First of all, it's very easy and requires no extra infrastructure. You stand up your controllers and guess what? You've got MCS installed. And it's a very quick right click and you can kind of fuddle through it without trying. It relies on gold image snapshots and it copies those snapshots to the data store and then points the VMs back there. The downside of MCS is it definitely requires extra IOPS. On the other hand, PVS does require extra infrastructure. You need at least 2 extra servers. And I can tell you for a fact there is a learning curve that goes with this product. It is not that easy to stand up and figure on your own. However, if you're looking at an enterprise environment where you've got multiple catalogs and multiple images, PVS offers you a true library methodology of managing them and deploying them, which MCS does not offer. In addition, it significantly offers lower IOPS. So if you're looking at IOP performances, PVS is going to beat MCS pretty much any day of the week. Now, where does storage fit in? Well, it plays a very key role in provisioning the VMs in XenDesktop. Both MCS and PVS can utilize personal vDisks to customize a VM. What does this mean? If you want to allow a user to install software on their VM, you assign an additional disk to each VM object called a personal vDisk, or PVD. And what this does is it takes the deltas from the software installation, saves them on the personal vDisk, and when their machines are booted up with the provisioned image, it merges them in there to give them a unique looking machine. So you have to worry about storage there. In addition, on MCS, it's going to copy the gold image from the snapshot of the gold image to every single data store that any VM can possibly use. And then the VMs themselves point back to the snapshot for their OS partition. So you've got hundreds, maybe even thousands of VMs all pointing back to the same snapshot, reading from it constantly to load and operate its operating system. And that's going to generate a lot of IOP activity. In addition, there's a differential disk, which is a small disk partition to each VM that allows things that make that VM unique. Things like the SID and the name is all stored on that differential disk. For PVS, it works slightly different. First of all, you're going to have all your PVS servers, and they're all going to have a store where you're going to upload your gold images to. There's a couple of different techniques for how that store will be. You could have a single disk space location that the PVS servers map a drive to and point to as their store. It could be a UNC path that they point to. My personal preference is to have a large hard disk that's attached to the PVS servers, and that's the location of your store, and then you use replication technology to make sure all your PVS servers are in sync in terms of offering the gold images. When the VMs boot, they're going to use Pixie Boot, and they're going to talk to the PVS server, which in turn tells them, okay, this is the image you're going to use for your OS, and it starts streaming it to RAM from the PVS server. Each VM is going to have a hard drive attached to it called a write cache. And it's usually about 5 gigs in size. And the machine uses the write cache to cache portions of the OS that it's going to need more frequently to the hard drive for easier access instead of having to keep going back to the PVS server to reload sections into RAM. So there's a couple of different ways we can cache that information. The most used version of caching, and the one that typically is the reason why we have to talk about IOPS in Citrix, is a methodology called cache to hard drive. What happens is you attach a small drive about 5 gigabytes in size, and as memory needs to be freed up to operate, the cached portion of the OS that is in memory is then written to hard drive. This is why Citrix admins have been so focused on IOPS in the last few years, because this caching to hard drive is really where the bottleneck is. So that drive has to be on very fast disk space because that's what makes the VM work the fastest. Now, if you had the money, the better option is cache to RAM. However, you need tens of gigabytes, 15, 20, 25, in order for this to really work effectively. And not a lot of people can afford that for every single VM. If it's a very small environment, a couple of dozen VMs, sure, that one's not too hard to do. But when you're talking about thousands, that's a huge cost factor for customers, and they can't do that. Well, with XenDesktop 7, there's a new feature that was offered. It's cache to RAM with overwrite to hard drive. And Citrix will say this provides you single-digit IOPS. And in our RA, we're pretty much finding that that is definitely true. So what this does is, without adding additional RAM to your VM objects, a very small portion of the RAM is reserved for caching. And then as that fills up and needs to be cached out, Citrix will write larger block sizes less frequently, but write it to that hard drive that's attached. And that's how we get the lower IOPS. It's writing larger blocks less frequently. So just to kind of orient you to my battlefield, if you actually talk about the actual servers themselves, this is a fairly typical breakdown of what you'll see in a Citrix environment. Incoming to the users, they'll go from whatever their network point is, LAN, WAN, internet, and they'll come into storefront services. I only have one server in this picture, but typically there is multiple there for high availability. And there may be multiple ones for each entry point. Your LAN WAN users go to one set of storefront servers. Your internet-based users may go to a second set of storefront services. They'll come in and they'll broker connection through XenDesktop. If you are using MCS, your machines will be managed and controlled from the XenDesktop controllers. If you are using PVS, you will have a separate farm of Citrix PVS servers that will be managing the devices. You would also need a license server, and you would also need a SQL database for your data stores. And in addition to that, you're going to need very typical Windows Active Directory environment with DHCP and DNS running. So why do VDI projects fail? Well, the majority of them fail because of storage. Again, I kind of harp on this a little bit, but silos within IT really can be a contributing factor. When storage is not a stakeholder in your VDI project and is truly acting as a service provider, what's going to happen? They're going to allocate your storage, and they're not really going to be concerned with how it will be used. And let's face it, big cabinet storage for servers, for very large and transactional applications and stuff like that don't fit VDIs quite as well. In addition, there's usually a lack of transparency to the VDI admin in terms of what's going on behind that curtain of storage. When a problem comes through, does the storage admin, are they really looking at the right health of what's going on? Just because they have green lights does not mean their storage is responding correctly. And just about every Citrix admin will tell you it's always their fault. It's a real sticky problem. When that major case comes through with performance is bad, and that's all the user can tell you is performance is bad, it's the VDI admin that's always the loser in these ones. They're always the person who's trying to prove it's not their fault. And again, if you can't see what's going on in storage, how do you know if you do have a storage problem? Because again, what's a great console to the storage admin may not be the performance a VDI admin needs. A big problem in VDI projects is they can't predict what their IOPS are before the project begins. This has happened to me. Build a VDI environment. Well, okay, so tell me what are the users going to be? What are the IOPS? I don't know. You're going to have 300 people who do this and 150 people to do that. Well, unless I've actually got the environment stood up, it's kind of hard for me to tell what the IOPS are going to be needed. If I was to go on the internet and start Googling away and say, what are the IOP requirements for VMs, it's going to be all over the place because there's no rule of thumb as to an office worker generates this and a developer generates that. So before you even build your environment, you've got to give a guesstimate to the people who are buying your hardware for you, which is typically not you. It's typically somebody else who has a stake in the game that they may not be looking out for your best interest. And you've got to tell them, I think I need this many IOPS. Well, that doesn't really mean a whole lot when it comes down to what the real world's going to look like when the infrastructure is up. Now, let's say you get your infrastructure up. You may have very poorly constructed proof of concepts. It is not uncommon to not work with actual users on your proof of concepts. You may have some type of customer liaison who's doing what they think the end user is going to be doing, but they're not doing things. And this has happened to me. They open up, Internet Explorer and they run the one Oracle application that they go in for, and then they close out. And that's what your liaison will do. What your real customer will do will open up IE, open up another tab to CNN, open up another tab to look at their stocks, then they'll open up another tab to check their email. Well, that's a significantly higher performance hit than just going into this one application, running a query, and then closing out. In addition, you own the VDI admin. Again, they're getting the numbers of, okay, well, I think I need 5 IOPS for these type of users and 12 IOPS for these kind of users. Well, that's just normal daily operations. What about stress situations? What happens when power goes out and then power comes back on and you've now got to boot 1,500 VMs and have them up and running because all a VP knows is power just came back on? What's your boot storm going to look like? What's your logging storm going to look like when it's shift change? What about if you have to provision more VMs during a normal working day on an existing production environment? I mean, I have had somebody walk up to me and say, hey, Mel, there's a hurricane coming through in this part of the country. We need to be ready for 200 users that don't usually use this environment to use this environment when they work from home tomorrow. That's happened to me. Can you handle 200 extra users tomorrow by deploying 200 machines today while everyone else is working? What's that performance going to be like to your environment? VDI admins aren't usually thinking about these. They're thinking about, what does my day-to-day operation work like? I'll worry about the stress situations later. We'll get through those. But your stress situations can literally bring your environment down. Are you prepared for that up front? So what can we, XIO, do to make a Citrix implementation very successful? First off, I kind of hinted at this earlier, I think we should leave the traditional cabinet storage to the SAN specialists. It's really not the best fit for a VDI environment. Let them run the big giant databases. Let them run the big giant server partitions. But let's let the VDI admin, the Citrix admin, own his or her own storage. And this can possibly make some admins freak out, but truly I like our ICE Manager product. It really is an intuitive interface that allows a Citrix admin to operate, maintain, provision their storage, and it works in a method that's not terribly far off from many of the consoles that he or she already works in with that already. You can look at your storage from the storage up to the server. You can take it from the server down. It's easy to manage. It's easy to operate. In terms of the size of our units, our ice units are 3U. And I really think the idea of building a blade set that makes a cluster and then putting the ice right there with it, it's very modular. And it allows you, as you grow, if you need a new cluster, you put a new unit in with it there. You don't have to worry about where are we going to put this. We do not need a whole rack to put our devices in. They fit very small, very concise, very modular with what's going in already. Ice Manager, again, it integrates with hypervisor consoles. So one thing an admin doesn't really want to hear is that they need a new console. Well, we can make everything work from one point. You can actually manage your devices, your hypervisor devices, inside of ICE and keep an eye on your storage at the same time. In addition, our hybrid storage with CADP is a very sweet spot. Why? Because you can take your high roller users, the people who have suddenly become active after coming back from the water cooler, and they're getting ready to load a video, or they're doing something else that needs a lot of power to it. CADP is going to promote them to give them the power and the speed when they need it, while they need it. And the users who walk to the water cooler can be taken off of the flash and put back on the traditional HDD storage. And the admin does not need to do this. It requires no interaction at all. Another thing that always impresses me with our ICE products is the fact that we come default with a 5-year warranty. And you have the option for 2 more years after that. The reason why is admins are used to this horrible warranty cycle. You buy hardware, and of course you're going to get platinum the first year because the sales guy is going to throw it in just to sweeten the deal. And then the first year after that's over, your manager is looking at where to cut some money. Well, maybe we don't need platinum. Silver is just as good. I mean, look, they still respond in the same amount of time. But everybody knows there's a reason why it's platinum and it's silver. There's a difference in the level of support you're going to get. Another year or 2 rolls by and they've dropped you down to bronze, which is kind of like the training level. And then at some point you might get stuck with a third-party support system, somebody who is quite literally buying used parts, recycling them, and then sending them to you to do your break fixes. I have horror stories about that, and it's just something I fear. Knowing that I've got 5 years of solid support up front that can't be renegotiated and dropped down is an amazing feature to myself. Not only managers are going to love it because they don't have to worry about paying for it, renewing it, re-upping it. It's already there. It's covered up front. And if they're worried that we only do VDI, well, we don't always only do VDI. Our ICE products can be used for other products, just about everything else traditional storage can. So if they have a fear that are we committing to this device, and in a year or 2, if the VDI project fails, what are we going to do with it? Easy, find another purpose for it. Or if you don't use all of the space that you're going to use for your VDI project, guess what? You now have space to put something else on. We are many things to many people. We're not just VDI only. So if I was asked for recommendations, first off, I would point the users to Citrix's own website. They definitely have best practices out there, and I'm not going to go over those because they're very well written and documented to start with. However, I would say that if it's at all possible, they should look at buying platinum level licenses, because the platinum licenses give them supporting tools that may not come with the other licenses. Things like profile management, power and capacity management, provisioning services, all come with platinum licenses. And each of these tools is designed to take a little bit of the administrative burden off the administrator and allow them to make modifications, and allows them to make repeatable processes. So definitely look at platinum licenses. I'm also a huge fan of having Citrix on as many layers as possible. As I said before, they all went to the same fraternity. They all know the secret handshake. This means that they're actually written and designed with the idea of they can fit together like puzzle pieces. If they have any kind of security issues that they need to encrypt their SSL going on, their traffic for ICA, if they have anything like internet-based users coming in. They really should look at NetScaler being their gatekeeper. And the nice thing about having NetScaler in your environment, you stand up Insight Manager, which is a companion piece to it, tie that into your desktop director tools. And when you're looking at an individual user that calls into the help desk and says, I'm having poor performance, you've got network information regarding latency and things like that coming from the NetScaler, giving you a very holistic picture that complements also things like CPU and memory. So you can see, okay, CPU and memory look good, but I definitely have a huge level of latency. And then you can give that information to the network admin and say, here we go, here's my proof that I think something's wrong. And you can run your NetScalers without infringing on the network admin's turf. In addition, if they are looking at deploying a hypervisor, I would definitely say if they need to look at Xen Server, it could be included in Platinum as well. And I will say that the nice thing that Citrix really does well is there's a similar look and feel across their platforms and how they're managed and their consoles run. My specialty has definitely been XenApp, but when I had to pick up XenDesktop, it wasn't that difficult because a lot of the management was similar to XenApp. In addition, the handful of times I've had to log into a Xen Server console and poke around, I kind of know what to expect and where to find things because, again, I'm used to using the consoles and the administrative tools and the other platforms. Again, optimization on as many layers gives you aggregate performance increase. And this is, again, goes back to the VDI admin owning their storage. If you can't own your storage, if you don't understand how it's running, if you're not actually controlling it and being the administrator of it, how can you know that your performance is best? How do you know it's been tuned correctly? If you own your storage, you can understand what needs to be tuned, what needs to be fixed to give you the best performance possible. And again, I go back to the whole silos in IT. I'm not saying to back away from ITIL. What I'm saying is, instead of looking at vertical silos and the disciplines all looking at each other's services, create a horizontal silo. Make VDI a service. And the members from each individual silo that are a member of the VDI team, they actually look at each other as team members within the VDI project. So that's all I have for today. Definitely, if you've got any questions, you can reach out to me. Or if there's anything you think I need to add to the presentation, just let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So I'm going to sign off, and I want to thank you for watching my presentation.